Vital's B Practice podcast is proudly sponsored by Maxis, BergTech, and Industry 9.
Should we kick this thing off with the question that's not necessarily related to snowshoe or US
Yeah,
Open?
yeah, let's do it.
This question, I'll have to click on the name in a minute to say who it is, but it says, I've always wondered how Dak would answer when respectfully asked to compare himself to other top pros. What do they do that Dak does better and the other way around? Also, what technical skills like straight lining, rock gardens at speed, berms, etc., does he feel are his weak points, and how does he like decide that's like his weak point? Yeah, like how do you audit yourself? Like when you compare yourself to others, what do you see as a weakness, and then what part of a track or riding situation is a weakness for you?
Yeah, that's interesting. I can think of a lot of strengths. I think I'm really good at berms. Like my overall ability to hit a corner or a berm, my speed that I can hit a berm is pretty insane, I think, in comparison to other dudes. But I feel that I'm not as good when it's the complete opposite. When I go down the track, I look for things to bounce off of. So I'm almost like just changing direction off of things. But when there's nothing to change direction off from, I struggle at that when it's unsupported and it's a bit inconsistent and you have to be like really light and gentle with your turning and your input and you don't know how much traction's there. I'm pretty bad at that. And that's something I was actually watching the second motos last night of I guess it's World Super Motocross thing that they're doing, SMX, and it was really slippery, and it looked like throttle control was really important and things like that. So I was actually thinking about that, into like if you want to be good at turning on a dirt bike, and we were watching it with Frida, and I was looking at like Joe Shimoda has a bit of hesitation, like he comes into the corner. And when he changes directions before he gets on the throttle, there's like a tenth or 2/10. And even though he's really good everywhere else, like that 2/10 in his turn is what Deegan has no hesitation. His roll speed is really good. And that's something I was thinking about for downhill. It's like I need to work on inconsistent corners where there's not a lot of support and just keeping that roll speed and that like smoothness of turning. So if you watch when I turn, and maybe it's because I've rode the DHR for so long, I like initially commit really hard to the side knob and I just like really lean hard. And I think that that's something that affects me when it's slippery or let's say like slimy hard pack, no traction. When I watch Bruni's helmet cams, his turns are all so like long and arcing and easy flowing turns where I just kind of come in and hit something. And I try not to like bog the bike down, but sometimes that does happen when you need something to turn off of. Where Bruni is just so good at these like arcing, sweeping turns, just real gentle, flowing all the time. And that's something that I really need to work on. So I was looking at that. I'm like, there's no way to really ride a turn track for moto, and using the moto bike, I have been coached on the moto bike and I have an issue with keeping my eyes moving throughout the turn. So I'll fixate on the kink in the corner and then drop my shoulder, where I should just keep my eyes lean into the kink so it doesn't stand me up and hold the throttle on, but keep my eyes moving through the corner. So that does happen for me turning on the downhill bike. So I'm using the motocross bike to try to keep my eyes moving and work on my lean angle so I don't lean super hard when I turn, because I have a tendency of leaning too hard on the motocross bike as well. But I want to have a turn track for the downhill bike where it's just you have off camber corners, you have berms, you have like every sort of corner without like the high risk items like rock gardens, big drops, big jumps, something I can go ride on the limit safely. And if I crash, it's not like it's jagged and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I can actually work towards finding the limit a bit more. And also I struggle in the dirt, and this is going to sound super weird, But when it's topsoil, kind of mushy topsoil with roots, I find that very hard because I ride like a real hard base is sometimes slippery or almost like a gravel road a lot. So when it comes to like running the sections that are muddy, almost like wet loam, I really am not good at that. So the US Open had the first section on the track was just loamy, rooty, East Coast riding. But all of our mountain is so steep that we ride at, all of that gets washed off. So we don't get to practice it. So I want to work on that as well. So there's definitely some things that I feel like I struggle with in terms of confidence. And I think that's the best way to have self-assessment of like, where am I losing time and what am I getting in the starting gate thinking about in comparison to other riders. And I think it's cool because with GoPros, you get to see some more insight to other people's runs, which I think is something that I can use to assess myself. Like at the US Open, me and Joe Breeden were exactly the same all the way to the last corner on the track, and I hit it better than he did. And that was the difference in a second and a half. I made that time on Joe in one corner that I had a high level of commitment on. So with GoPros, you can kind of self-analyze, which is nice. And I think the second part of the question, away from my self-assessment as a rider, things I'm good at versus things I'm not, they asked, how do I compare myself to other riders?
Well, even like,
Correct.
what do you think? Yeah, like, I think you answered that perfect with the first part. They also said, like, this is Kyle Stelzer. So shout out to him for this question. But other way around, like, what do you think you do better than other riders or is a strength? And then how does that apply to specific sections of track?
Well, I have a motocross background, so I feel like I'm really good at balancing in the ruts. But with that being said, I think a lot of other riders will get out of them, like Leo Gang. Reese Wilson was just so good at carrying momentum and committing and staying out of the low rut lines that were bogging the bike down. So I have the ability to balance in them well, coming from motocross. I think I have a good ability to make fast decisions in a race scenario because I grew up racing in a moving environment where not only are you reading terrain, you're reading what the riders are doing in front of you. So like when I go motocross racing, I have a terrible start, but I'll go into the first corner in 13th and come out in 4th. Like I'm really good at predicting and finding gaps and making very fast decisions. And I think a lot of that comes from race runs and from a motocross starts and racing in traffic, but also I get good at that because I race and predict terrain on the fly really well. And I've spent a ton of time riding enduro moto or riding essentially blind trail and racing some enduro racing and sprint enduros where I'm predicting how terrain is going to develop over the course of time and also time, weather, and reading terrain quickly on the fly on the motocross bike. So just going out riding for 2.5 hours and just dealing with things as they come and making decisions like, oh, that was a good decision, that was a bad decision, and being able to analyze it within my head. I think I'm great at that. Also, I have a BMX background, so technically I'm very precise. I can pretty much jump a lot of the gnarlier gaps or where you need to like land really precisely on the back of a rock to generate speed. I think that I can pretty much put my wheels anywhere I want them. Coming from riding skate parks and like freestyle BMX, BMX race, and my ability to hit berms fast and like hard and the level of commitment in which I can hit a corner, I think is one of the best in the world. So maybe not when it's unpredictable or it's put you in a defensive type position, but if it's a consistent corner, I can blow the tires off the bike if I want to. Like,
yeah.
But that also has kind of got me in trouble before. So Like sometimes my head says I can hit a corner harder than the bike can even handle. And that's something I had to do, like work on in my early part of my career. So yeah, it's interesting to see. Like when it comes to like jumping rhythm sections or doing a gnarly gap, like obviously it's at the trails, like I think really, really good at doing, like I can do gaps that nobody sees or transfers that nobody can do and pretty much grease them. Like not to be like tooting my own horn, so to speak, or being like egotistical. But the reality is that is the question. And that's something that I absolutely have complete confidence in. I can go to a set of dirt jumps and do something that nobody else has thought of or it can do. And that's something I'm like really prideful on and have challenged myself. I always challenge myself with stuff like that. And I think that pays dividends when it goes to a race and I have to pull up in the middle of a rock garden and land on the back of something and miss a route. And for example, Ludenville, when we were gapping off the top of that kind of crest onto the back of the berm midway down, Luca did it in semis. I didn't do it because it was slippery and scary, but like I greased that. Like dudes were like standing there, like not wanting to hit it. And I was like, oh, that's hit it second lap. Like that's easy.
Yeah.
Roll.
Even the jump, like the gap over the rock in Ludenville into the big left-hander, that was like kind of a rock landing that people were kind of tagging a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like you grease that in your race run.
Yeah. I think that's something that I take a lot of pride in. So
that's sweet.
Yeah.
It's cool insight. I've definitely seen it. I remember going to the Carlsbad skate park that I've been going to since I was like 4. And we went there your first time and you hit a step down gap from like a quarter to a bank. I had never once looked at a possibility. And you were like,
blind.
I think we might be with Tommy Zula maybe, which is probably part of the problem too.
Yeah,
you guys
he's good at
both are
that stuff
psycho
too.
at things like that. But like, I remember you like looking at me and be like, oh, you ever jumped from here to there? And I was like, to where? What do you mean from here to where? And then you literally rolled up to it once and then did it and then just kept doing it. And I was like, wow, like I've still never even, I would have to go back to like full face on and really hype myself up. But it is a difference for sure. Yeah. And I mean, I guess the difference is I would say Loic Bruni wouldn't describe himself as having that factor in his riding. So there is like, there's strengths and weaknesses, which is really fun to kind of dissect.
I don't think people really realize how nuts I am at riding a pump track. Like that's the good stuff I can. That's like I'm good at that. Like that kind of thing, I'm good at.
Dude, yeah, like your BMX and slalom history and background doesn't always. There's not a lot of opportunity racing a downhill bike for that to come through, but you see it every now and again, like you're talking about with berms and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think there's like when I think about it, there's probably 3 or 4 people I can think of that would compare in skill level, and they all have a similar background of BMX, moto, and then like mountain bikes as like an afterthought almost. And it's like Jubal Davis, Warren Niss, and then there's like maybe I
think Near's pretty good at that kind of thing, like the whole
Sean. Yeah. Yeah, it's like those 3. And then you, Dak, but like they haven't worked on it as much as Dak has.
Yeah,
I think, like the commitment level
as much.
Yeah,
I think there's very like someone I rode behind the other day that I was really impressed was Thomas Stock. I rode behind him at Schladming. He was really good, and I was like, this dude. I don't know why is like not at the top all the time. It's like, wow, that dude's actually really good at riding a bike. But the dude I ride behind that blows my mind consistently is Warren. Like, he's the only dude, and I don't know, like, what his program is. Obviously, his head is in a different place. He has raced, has not raced, has committed, has not committed. But that dude, when I ride behind him, I'm like, he's really good. And Isaac Leibson. Isaac is also another dude that I have rode with, and I'm like, this dude is like really, really good at riding a bike.
That's a dude that I'm like, how did he not win World Cups?
Yeah.
Like,
For
I mean, I
sure.
know how
Oh,
he did it,
absolutely.
but like,
Yeah. It's like,
it's personal
is-
stuff, but
yeah.
it's not anything lacking skill.
No, not at all. And it's really like fun for me because when I go ride, and a lot of those dudes that are that good don't really like riding with other dudes that are really good. I don't know why. But they're very competitive. That's how they got to be that good. But man, I very rarely ride with somebody that just is like, man, this dude can do things I can't. And both of those dudes are like that for sure. Like
Yeah.
equally
I think-
skilled, and they'll do stuff and I'm like, oh man, like I don't really feel the need.
You end up
that,
doing it
but-
because you always end up like getting peer pressured into this thing where like, I don't know, it's your headspace and stuff where you're super competitive and you always end up hitting the big gap, doing the trick or whatever. That's where I compare it to like Warren. Like Warren will all of a sudden just pull out like a flip or a 3. Like the dude, like I'm pretty sure he used to be able to truck driver, like still probably can. Like, and it comes out of nowhere. And that's like
if I had to do one, I would.
Yeah, Dak goes to the skate park and he's hitting these like gnarly bowl gaps that are like a 6-foot quarter into a 10-foot, and you're like, it's vert on the other side. How do you land in vert?
Yeah, I like
That is
doing
really
stuff.
funny. That makes me feel a lot better for all those years following you dudes, being like kind of in my head about my own abilities, but I also was like, I think they're just really good, like really like raw talent and natural ability. Like that's how I've always thought.
I'm even worse than you, Jason. Like,
no,
like there's like you guys up there, and then there's me out the back that just holds on for life, and you know, and sometimes pull it together. Really good at holding on to the bars.
Yeah, just committed. Pull out the duct tape, strap me in, put me in, coach.
Well, Greg Menard.
Well, that was cool insight. I dig that. I think people will enjoy hearing. It's funny now that we talk because you're like a podium finisher all the time. Like, sure, you're still Dak, but like now the things you say seem to just like hold all this much more weight. So people are getting insights to what a podium headspace at World Cup is like.
Yeah,
Dak, I got another question.
Weird.
Yeah, you can do it. Yeah, give me. I mean, I have something to say on that too. So throw the question.
Yeah,
at
go
me.
for it, Dak. I'll ask after.
I think that the thing that blows my mind too is like,
as most of you know, tires play a huge part in deciding if you make it down a section of trail and control or end up bonsaiing to the bottom on your head. Tires are not the place to cut corners, and Maxxis offers a massive range of models to meet the needs of any rider. They've built their name through racing at the highest levels of the sport, and you can visit your local shop or favorite online retailer to get the same tread patterns and compounds used by the fastest racers in the world. And if it were up to me, you can't go wrong with an Ass Guy up front and a DHR2 in the rear. Make sure to head to maxxis.com for more. With the tagline Labor of Love, BergTech isn't shy about the countless hours they've invested in developing components that they feel offer riders a true technical advantage. Based in the UK and born out of a passion for mountain biking and racing, BergTech produces a ton of trick parts, from bars, stems, and grips to anodized axles, shock hardware, and saddles. The cockpit of choice for the Santa Cruz Syndicate and many other riders, make sure to check out BergTech the next time you want to give your bike some deserving love. Tested, machined, anodized, and hand-built by fellow mountain bikers in Asheville, North Carolina, Industry 9 wheels and hubs have become synonymous with quality and durability. I don't know if there is a noise as iconic as the buzz of an Industry 9 hub. They offer wheels for every budget and riding discipline, from dirt jumping to gravel riding or e-biking, plus you can get crazy with customized hub and individual spoke colors. So if you've been dying to build that Rasa-themed bike or some sweet rainbow wheels, Industry 9 has got you covered. Make sure to head to industry9.com to learn more.
so like I've learned a lot more about other dudes' programs. Like Laurie does quite a bit with his riding coach, and like I think maybe in the UK, like you could do that. I don't know if you can do it better or worse based upon their terrain, or if I can do it or I can't. I think right now I'm really limited with the tracks that I have. It makes it really hard for me to work on some of my skills. Like I have a place where I can go ride e-bikes or trail bikes that has pretty much everything I need in terms of like tech, rock gardens. The only thing I don't have is a lot of like off camber rooty corners or roots in general. That's the thing I struggle with where I live. To like, I guess you could work on that in maybe West Virginia or whatever, but you definitely have to move around. But there's no place for me to really like a rider development deal. Like, and there's very few people that I feel like I could hire to actually help me be a better rider. Like Aaron has definitely helped me riding with him. Like some of like bad traits that I do that I need to work on, like dropping my head and stuff. But I mean, I can't think of a lot of dudes. Maybe like Chris Herndon. Like if you could go ride trail bikes with Chris Herndon, maybe he could pick up on things that you could do to make you better. But other than your competitors, there's not a good way to develop skill on technical tough tracks, and also coaches to help you actually improve your skill set. So that's something that's been very difficult for me is riding a lot of routes. Like I need a place to ride routes, and I get pretty frustrated because they keep getting chopped out of all of our local tracks, and somehow they just anything that's difficult gets rogue-hoed out. And that's the problem with, and I get really mad because it's like, how do you get better? Like I get angry, like I see red, and I'm like, why? This is the only thing that made it hard. And then that one route that was made this whole section hard is now gone. And it's very difficult for me to find a place. Like obviously I took on a pretty crazy undertaking that I had no idea that I was going to rebuild an entire house by myself, but somehow the environment of our economy and the situation I found myself in led to me doing that. But kind of just had to bail myself out of that situation through my hard work. But now maybe I can build some more stuff to train on, and maybe get some trail bikes and stuff that's away from the bike park where I live that I can really challenge myself on, because man, it's really hard to see excavators building mountain bike trails. I'm really bummed on that. And it just is, I understand that we have to grow the base. We have to grow. If we want to continue to have a job, you have to grow the base of the pyramid. But man, a lot of people ride bikes, and it would be really nice to see some more difficult trails to ride in the world. Some more hand-built stuff, more routes, more rocks, more off-camber corners. Like it would be really nice to see more difficult riding.
You gotta journey.
You gotta
get out of old Tennessee.
Go the old Charlie Harrison method. Put some PVC pipe in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Can you do that?
Yeah.
That's what I was just thinking when you were saying that. I was like, it's time to go to Home Depot.
Yeah.
Well,
that's
that's
that
the
gold
thing
membership
too.
card you got.
I've done it
start
too.
building some water bars, dude.
Yeah.
It's true.
Literally
digging holes.
I went around on the
Start planting some
hillside when I was
trees, Dak.
little.
Come on.
I went searching for rocks one time, and like was like rolling all these rocks around on this track I was building, trying to make a rock garden because there was like no rocks. Like you guys have both seen where I live, like where I grew up.
Yeah,
it's just rolling hills.
You're out there at, what is it, Lime Ridge open space or whatever?
Dude, I'm out at Lime Ridge. Yeah, trying to find some rocks to ride through.
Trying to start a rock garden, see if it'll grow.
Yeah, water in this thing.
Planting rocks.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, I definitely feel that it's difficult in the US to find a track that you can actually practice on that's safe and it has everything that you need. Because I think a lot of the tracks that have the routes and stuff like that, it's to the extreme. Mm-hmm. They're like up in Bellingham, like they're like the steepest trails that you're riding on your trail bike, and you're not actually practicing anything. You're just kind of surviving a lot of times. But yeah, it's like, what do? You just have to build your own track, I guess, is what you're gonna end up doing.
Go back to Morzine.
Yeah. And that's one thing I was gonna ask is, like, do you think like the Planey is, because it has off camber, it has roots. It's high speed, but it doesn't seem like there's too many rocks out there. I've never ridden Morzine.
I think you can ride. There is not a lot of rocks, but if you want to ride slippery rocks, you can go to Linderetz. But yeah, it's not great
But
for rocks.
crashing
I will say
wise,
that.
like crashing
But-
wise, like you're gonna slide for a long time until you hit a tree.
Yeah, you can crash and not like if you crash on black, it's going to be pretty rough. Like you're
Mhm.
going to get wrecked. But if you crash on a lot of the off camber rooty stuff, you can crash and like stay alive.
Mhm.
Like you laugh when you fall, not like turn into pink mist.
Yeah. So that was one thing I was gonna ask you if you thought that was kind of a viable place to gain those skills.
100%.
That skill set?
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
It's that place is really, really good, and that's why I've spent so much time there. And I think that has really helped me as a downhill racer in the past year is just spending all that time riding that terrain.
Yeah. And then the next question was you talked about kind of just looking ahead and looking through corners and kind of like your eye speed and being able to like read the terrain. And that's something that I think a lot of riders struggle with is looking ahead, but like actually not just fixating on something, is like being able to remember what's going on, like, and continue to look ahead because you fixate on something because you want to know like what's in between that point and where you're at, or like what's in front of you kind of, but like you don't remember it quick enough, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you'll have to move your eyes before you get to something to the next thing, and that's so difficult. And that's something I think I do well in a race scenario, which actually helps me ride faster racing, is I look like I don't know how to train myself to do it better out of a race scenario, but racing, I look so far ahead and I'm so committed that it's almost like you don't actually see what you're riding. And
Yeah.
because you are looking so far ahead, keeping your eyes moving.
It's crazy to think about. I don't ride super fast much at all these days, so I don't look that far ahead.
Yeah, you don't have to. You know?
Yeah, but I mean, it makes sense. Like that in my mind would be one of the necessary steps to grow your speed. Of course, sounds obvious, but it is pretty hard to apply.
Yeah, and is there anything you practice off the track, like outside of riding, to gain that skill or like grow it?
Turn tracks on a dirt bike. There's nothing better. Long kinked ruts where you have to like, and I have a skill set where I can hold the throttle on. I'm safe with keeping my feet on the pegs, that kind of a thing. But man, there is nothing to train your eyes to move faster than the dirt bike.
That's sweet.
That's why I bought my house in Tennessee, is to have a turn track in my backyard. I mean, I have a tractor, I have a tiller, I have a ripper, and I can literally get deeper, longer, more kinked ruts than any motocross track around me in my backyard. And even like I do it on my little, and if you're not good enough to do it on a full size moto, like I have this mid size, it's a CRF 125 big wheel FB. So it's like the 4-stroke trail version of a 125, and it literally has the same amount of horsepower as my 110. And the thing turns like a big bike. It's air cooled, and I ride that thing more than any other thing I have. I probably ride it just as much as my trail bike, and both from like riding turns, like being good with lean angle, being able to like see through ruts. Like the 110s are fun, but you don't actually get any better at turning on a 110. They're just like go-karts. The 125, literally you can hit corners like a big bike, and you're going a similar speed to like when you're not going super fast on a downhill bike. So like you're in the second gear, and the throttle doesn't affect standing the bike up or too much. Like the engine has so little power that it doesn't have an effect on the ergonomics of how the bike turns. So you can just literally ride ruts on the thing and ride turns on it and balance through long ruts, and it's just like riding a downhill bike. And I really quite enjoy that.
Yeah.
So if you're not that good at riding a dirt bike, maybe that's like one of those little KLX 140s or something.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Mhm.
Perfect. A lot of these dudes, if they actually want to get better, they go buy a 250F, and I'm like, that thing is just going to hurt you.
Yeah, it's too much, especially if you're trying to apply it that specifically, you know?
Mhm.
I also, that brings up a question. Have you made your cranks any shorter? If you're training so much on a moto with your feet parallel, what cranks are you on now?
155s.
Mm.
I like it.
Are those
Yeah, I
custom?
think that they custom. No, there are some companies that make them. You can get them if you want to. But yeah, the Terps are custom. So something else I think that you need to look at is something I struggle with when I ride a ton on a downhill bike and I'm constantly standing in a split squat position. My hamstrings and my glutes actually develop differently. So that causes twisting in my hips, and I actually get like almost like scoliosis, but I get like a twist in my spine from spending so much time standing right foot forward. So I think that pedaling definitely helps because I spend a lot of time pedaling, but that also like leads to a like a tight psoas, and like my hip flexors get really tight. So I think the dirt bike is really good also because you're standing not in a split squat position. So you're standing on the balls of your feet. Something I struggle with is riding downhill. You have to externally rotate your knees. So you want your hips to be unlocked and out so that you can balance. But on the motocross bike, you're constantly squeezing. So I'm actually stronger internally than externally in the hips. So I've had to work to get stronger externally and build my glute medius to be able to hold my knees out in a squatting position riding downhill. But when you're riding downhill, you're always in a position where you're holding yourself up in terms of like your chest and your hands. And on a motocross bike, for the most part, you are standing in actually a better position with a flat back, with your hips somewhat unlocked, and you're fighting acceleration forces, so you're always pulling. So that's why I like using the dirt bike quite a lot to break up the sport specific side of training for downhill, because you're in like a better position than you are on a downhill bike. And I think it's actually pretty healthy to ride the motocross bike if you can do it in a safe manner. Especially if you're like feet on the pegs, like I don't know how many people follow like Rhino and like riding in like a really proper position, or the Moto Academy, things like that. And it's really tough for me to see so much development going on in motocross and so little development going on in downhill, especially when you watch the juniors at a national level in America. They have no clue. Like it's just like a free for all. It's like a water balloon fight. They're just like flailing around out there, and it's like breaking expensive bike parts, hitting stuff with no clue, just trying to go fast. And I just wish that there was more emphasis putting into riding well, riding safe, like not destroying everything you own and yourself in the process. So maybe that's something we can work on in the future. Man, I think that
There's a
that's
yeah,
a
there's
whole side
this,
of this that's
this whole mentality around, I guess, downhill coaching nowadays that is spend a lot of time on your downhill bike. And to me, it kind of seems backwards because downhill riding is a lot, I would say, primarily timing based. It's like your timing needs to be down. And that's what I think of when you say these kids breaking bike parts, all that stuff. It's like them crashing all over the place. It's a lot of it comes down to their timing is off. Like they could have the best form in the world, like hips engaged, hips and lower back engaged. They're like heels dropped, elbows up, like flat back, like looking ahead. But if their timing's not right, they're just going to get thrown off their bike.
yeah.
They're gonna pump in the wrong spot, or like not unweight in the right spot.
I mean, it's everybody we were talking about, Dak included a little bit ago. you talk about what they did prior to downhill, and it's a lot of timing based activities, like especially BMX or riding dirt jumps, skate parks, moto. I feel like I've been saying that forever, and I think we're getting less. We were in a period like the generation behind us that grew up with access to trail bikes, and I would say in the US, Aaron made it to where it seemed like you had to be training and eating a certain way, and like that was a big focus to become a professional with downhill racing. And I think the one downside of that is a lot of kids got on trail bikes and they just pedaled all the time, and they never went and dicked around hitting jumps and worked on like those sort of base skills. And then you also never, maybe you're not going as fast because so much of your time is spent like quote unquote training. And I think pump tracks are helping that now. Like there's a lot more, pump tracks are so much more easy access, and dirt jumper is a lot more popular. Like I would say most kids probably, if they're an avid cyclist, have a dirt jumper again, which is great. Like that's, I base all of that on like me growing up being okay with timing stuff, because I didn't ride motorcycles. Like, and I didn't race BMX. So if I didn't have a dirt jumper to ride all the time, I think my skills would be a lot worse on a downhill bike.
Yeah, I do think there's a generation that's coming up, like the Ryder Lawrence, Asa Vermette, like a few of those kids. There's like a handful of them that are coming up as kids that ride dirt jumpers. They ride pump tracks, they ride dirt jumps. Like Asa's sick on a dirt jumper, like he's sick at riding trails and stuff. And like there's those kids, but then there's also the kids that are just riding trail bikes all the time. And there's a lot more that are just riding trail bikes all the time than there are riding dirt jumpers and BMX bikes.
For sure. Yeah.
And you kind of need both.
I think it's still skewed that way. Yeah, you need a balance.
But when we
there
were
was a
growing
period
up,
when it was way worse.
It was like Luca, Lucas, like Johnny Simonetti,
Cody
all
Kelly.
my friends. We only had a downhill bike and a dirt jumper. Like you had gears on your dirt jump bike because you would go and ride that in the like as a cross country bike almost. Like you would just stand up and pedal up your open space, and that's how you would do your pedaling.
Dude, for sure. Yeah, no, it's there's a space there, Dak, for some helpful education on riding technique. And even I think what we're talking on really is the things to do that give you a base to work off of. It might not be directly related to going faster on your downhill bike, but in the big picture, it is important further down the line.
Yeah, I think too now where I'm at as an athlete, like I have a pretty good base of fitness, and I'm decently strong. I'm working on getting stronger, and I have like this big skill set. But I think for forever, like I got sucked, and I think it's definitely when I trained with Nico quite a lot, I got sucked into like trying to be so fit, and like I always felt like I wasn't fit enough. And then I think I literally got to the point where I just focused too much on fitness. And now I'm trying to almost back out of that a bit, like work on strength more. Like I'm fit. I get to the bottom of a race run and I'm like I'm not wrecked. Like I feel like if anything, I need to teach my brain to allow myself to dig deeper, because I am fit enough to dig deeper than I usually do. But yeah, I'm almost backtracking now, and it's like I'm fit enough. Like there's not an issue with that. I need to teach my brain to go faster, and I need to be stronger, and I want to spend more time riding the various assortment of equipment that I have. And I almost did that like the week before I went to snowshoe. I didn't touch my trail bike. I didn't want to pedal. I had no interest in pedaling. I just went to the pump track 2 days, rode pit bikes for 2 days, and did a small gym workout. And like that was my focus for the week. I just was like, I want to ride. I'm like having fun riding, and I think that's I've almost realized now, like if I'm getting beat by somebody, it's not because they're fitter than me. Maybe if they're stronger than me, like Loic looks like a tight end. Like the dude is huge. And I'm like, okay, well, I need to put more focus on eating better and getting stronger, but also just being more skillful. Like I'm getting beat because now, not because like I'm not fit enough. I'm getting beat because I literally am not willing to ride this as fast as somebody else is, and I need to work on that.
Yeah,
Like
that's
it.
a good space to be in, I feel like.